I'm not going to give a detailed introduction to each speaker. You can find out more about the wonderful speakers that we have now in the delegate pack. But I do want to name who we're going to be hearing from. First of all, we're going to be hearing from Nikita Sinclair at Impact on Urban Health, Katie Palmer at the Food and Fun Programme from Food Sense Wales, Andrew Fulsey from Feeding Britain, Ruth Sirocco from Eat Club, and then we'll be hearing from Dr. Fran Pontin and Sue Davis from Which. Dr. Fran Pontin at the Consumer Data Research Centre and Sue Davis at Which, about an initiative to identify places in the UK where it's difficult to access affordable food. So really looking forward to hearing about some solutions that have been put into place and the perspective from the community level as well. And we're going to start with Nikita. Nikita.
Thank you. Hi everyone in the room and everyone online. It's a real pleasure to be here today to talk about our work on children's health. So I'm going to kick off just with a little bit of background as to who we are. At Impact on Urban Health, our aim is to make inner city areas healthier places for people to grow up, live and work. And we recognise that if you live in an urban area, you will be exposed to distinct health challenges, and the more deprived the area you live in, the more those challenges will be felt. It is no coincidence that the people with the poorest health are those experiencing social, economic and environmental inequalities. And so we try to tackle these inequalities with the aim of improving and protecting people's health. Lambeth and Southwark in South London is our home, and so we focus on improving health equity in these two London boroughs using a test and learn approach. This means that we build evidence of what works to improve urban health, which we then share nationally and internationally. So you're probably thinking, what does this actually mean in practice? Well, we look at a set of urban health challenges that are prevalent in our boroughs, but also in other inner city areas. And you can see the 4 programmes of work that we're focusing on today on the screen. Currently, a lot of our work at Impact on Urban Health is focused on child health. What surrounds us shapes us, which is why we believe that all children should have access to the things they need to be healthy, no matter where they grow up or what their family background is. This includes having enough access to healthy, affordable food in an environment that prioritises child health. If we want our children to be healthy, thrive, and grow up to give back to society, we must fix our current food system. Right now, too many families are struggling to access the affordable, healthy food they need. And as a result, 1 in 3 11-year-olds is an unhealthy weight. Our high streets and supermarket shelves are flooded with unhealthy food options. And there are billions of pounds being pumped into marketing and advertising to ensure that these unhealthy food options continue to play a starring role in children's minds. And as we've heard today from many of the speakers, the problem is getting worse. Food prices have hit a 14-year high, and as of September, 1/4 of households with children have reported experiencing moderate or severe food insecurity. That's a 14 percentage point increase in just a year. Too many families are being forced to rely on cheap, high-fat, salt, sugar options. But we can fix this, and at Impact on Urban Health, we are trying to break the link between income and the nutritional quality of the food that people can access. This winter, that feels more important than ever. Our programme focuses on shaping the food options that surround people, children, in the places where they spend their time. Some examples of what this looks like. So on one end of the programme, we're working with the London Early Years Foundation to ensure that chefs have access to the training and skills they need to put healthy food in the spotlight in nurseries. And on the other end of our programme in the Streets portfolio, we're working with retailers to really understand what can supermarket layouts do to increase the purchasing of healthy foods. But we need to do this everywhere to put healthy food in the spotlight and ensure that we increase the flow of healthy, affordable food in children's homes, nurseries and schools, and in the streets and shops where families visit. To support this work across our 3 strands, we need to have a different conversation and focus on the role that the world around us plays in children's health. So we have tried and tested a new and inspiring narrative for change in collaboration with Frameworks UK, one of our partners, and we've already got a toolkit that can help other organisations in the room join in with this narrative that's available on our website. So if you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend you take a look. We've also recognised that if we're going to fix the food system and create long-lasting change, we need to influence both industry players and policymakers, which is another cross-cutting strand of our work. So again, what does this actually look like in practice? Well, I'm going to briefly touch on 3 core principles of our approach using examples from across the programme. Firstly, we fund projects that aim to put healthy, affordable food in the spotlight in Lambeth and Southwark, in our boroughs. Since 2018, we've been working with the Alexander Rose charity to ensure that families with children are supported to access affordable fruit and veg from local suppliers in Southwark. And as you can see, over 3,000 children have benefited from this project, many of whom were not eligible for government support, such as Healthy Start, and actually a quarter of those families had no recourse to public funds. Amazingly, also, since 2018, this has contributed to a £1.7 million boost to Southwark's local economy, which I think is just like a really clear example of the wider benefits that can happen when we invest in children's health. Secondly, we recognise that it's really, really important to ensure that those who are most impacted by health inequity are able to advocate for and co-produce the change that they want to see. And it's really encouraging today to see the other speakers talking about the importance of lived experience. We make sure that we weave this throughout all our work, but we also fund specific partnerships with organisations that aim to amplify the lived experience of children and young people, such as Bike Back 2030. Now, many of you might know about Bike Pack, but if you don't, Bike Back are looking to build a movement of young people who are calling for a fairer and more just food system. They are a youth-led organisation, which means that young people's insights and feedback drives all the work that they do. And much of this work is aligned with our Streets and Ventures strand, calling on big food brands to recognise and take accountability for the role that they do, must, and will play in children's health for the future. They do this by leading with really high-profile campaigns, but also with direct work with corporates. From our framing research, we've also understood that young people are really powerful and effective messengers. And if you listen to Bite Back for just a couple of minutes, you'll really easily see why. Finally, we know that if we're going to fix the food system, we need to identify and crucially address the wider structural drivers of nutritional inequality, some of which have been spoken about today. At Impacts in Urban Health, we try and do this in 2 different ways. So firstly, we identify and work with partners who are able to pull specific system levers. An example of this is with our school food work. We're working with Southwark Council to test how their commissioning powers can be used to improve the quality of school food in the borough. Another way that we do this is that we often convene our partners, bringing the evidence and insights that we generate in Lambeth and Southwark to call for national policy change, which I'm sure we will all agree is a really big lever for change. And at the moment, a really live example of this is our work with the School Food Review Group, where we are supporting a coalition of representatives from the catering industry, school leaders, local authorities, food campaigners and school children to call for a reform of the school food system. At the moment, the coalition has been really focused on supporting the Food Foundation's Feed the Future campaign, which is asking the government to extend the eligibility criteria of free school meals. We believe that school food is a huge opportunity for child health, yet at the moment, 800,000 children living in poverty do not have access to a hot school meal. And so we're using our collective power to call for this to change. And again, if others in the room are interested, I'd really recommend you going to the Food Foundation's website because we'd love for more people to join us. So that's all from me, a bit of a whistle-stop tour of our work, but I'm really looking forward to the panel discussion later to get into the detail. Thank you.
Thanks very much for outlining that fantastic work there. I have to admit to being biased since I'm chair of the board of Bike Back, but do go and have a look into their work and all of the other work that Impact on Urban Health is doing. So now we're going to hear from Katie Palmer on tackling holiday hunger. Katie.
Thank you. I think we're not quite good afternoon, so I'll say good morning. Hi, everybody here and online as well. It's great to be here, and thank you for being invited to speak today. So I'm going to talk to you today about tackling the school holidays. And I have to admit to feeling the pressure a bit on this one, because there are so many people in Wales that have got such a big investment in this programme that I'm going to talk about today. Before I get going, I would just like to ask everyone just to take a moment to have a think about what it would feel like as a parent approaching the school summer holidays when you were really, really worried about how you were going to look after your children during the holidays. You might be working part-time, working full-time, you could be one parent in a family, or you could be sharing the burden with somebody else. You might be struggling to afford to have enough food in the fridge. You might be worrying about how you're going to keep the kids occupied over the holidays. You might even be worried about having to leave them at home on their own while you go to work. And maybe you could also think about being a child. Maybe you're 10. Maybe you want to be out playing with your friends, but you can't because your mum's told you to stay at home. You've got the TV, if the cost of living crisis hasn't impacted on how much electricity you're allowed to use at home. And you're really hungry, but you know you can't eat anything that's in the fridge because it needs to be saved for later. Those are the sorts of things that we were trying to look at addressing during this programme as we go through it. And hopefully you'll also pick up on some of the points, especially from Karina's talk earlier this morning. So maybe if you can think about some of those aspects that Karina spoke about as you look at this presentation today. So I'm Katie. I head up Food Sense Wales, which is a charity hosted within the Welsh NHS. And it stems from the work of Food Cardiff, which is a sustainable food partnership, which is part of an 80-strong network of food partnerships across the UK. And I just highlight that now because it's important with respect to how Food and Fun was developed in the first place. So just to give you a tiny bit of Wales context very quickly, because I know time is not our friend at the moment. The Wellbeing of Future Generations Act is a piece of legislation on sustainable development, and it's one of the first, a world's first, sustainable development legislation. And it puts a duty on local public bodies to take account of future generations in their decision making. We also have the rights of the child enshrined in Welsh legislation. And we have our Wales obesity strategy called Healthy Wales, and our programme for government, which I am really pleased to say we do have a commitment to roll out universal free school meals in Wales by 2024 to all primary school children. And we also have a commitment to build on a programme that I'm going to be talking about today, which was called the School Holiday Enrichment Programme, but for ease is now called Food and Fun, which was the branding name that we've used for families. So Food and Fun is a school-based education programme. It provides food and nutrition education, physical activity, enrichment sessions, and healthy meals to children during the summer holidays. It was developed as a pilot in Cardiff in 5 schools, and has now developed into a fully funded Welsh Government programme since 2015 over the intervening years. The programme was originally developed by Cardiff and Vale Health Board, the dietitians in particular, Cardiff Council, the Education Catering Department, Sport Cardiff and Food Cardiff. and of course the schools which were involved in the programme. So I'd like to show you a video, if that works now, because I think this probably tells the story better than I can here today.
Most children look forward to the summer holidays. For many, it is a break from the monotony of daily lessons and a chance to play in the sun with friends. However, some families can find the summer break challenging. For children, it can mean long days without their school friends, while parents may feel the financial pressures from entertaining children and extra meal times. This is especially true in areas of social deprivation. The Food and Fun programme was developed to address the 6-week gap in provision during the school break, when some children are known to skip meals. It saw primary schools across Cardiff opening their gates to deliver healthy meals, physical activity, food education, and fun activities. It also made the most of excellent school facilities, playgrounds, IT suites, kitchens, gym halls, and gardens that usually lie dormant for 170 days of the year. For 4 weeks during the school holidays, children were able to join their friends in fun activities while learning more about nutrition, such as how much sugar is in their favorite snacks. Parents reported that their children were coming home feeling more enthusiastic about trying new and healthier foods. Once a week, parents and siblings were invited to the schools to share a nutritious meal, helping to bring families and communities together. The success of the model saw 4 other local authorities across Wales adopt the model, including Wrexham and the Vale of Glamorgan. This proved to be a catalyst for change, with the Welsh Government committing funding of £500,000 to grow the initiative across Wales in areas where it is needed most. The partnership's ambitions to influence policy locally and nationally to reduce health inequalities are already being realised, ensuring that children will have access to good food, education, health and play during school holidays. With the programme gaining attention across the UK, it is hoped that these gaps in school holiday provision will soon be a thing of the past.
We set out to develop a model of holiday provision that could be transferable across Wales. Winning the award has given us the recognition to be able to do that.
I think the main piece of advice is don't be frightened to be innovative and to work outside your comfort zone, because actually it does really pay off.
I think what it has shown that with enthusiasm and dedication and with partnership working, that anything is possible.
Thank you. So just to say that video was produced in 2016. So if anybody any eagle eyes saw the fact that it was an Eat Well plate rather than Eat Well guide, I thought you might. That's because it was before, or maybe just on the cusp of when the Eat Well guide was published. That was back in 2016, and we're now in 2022, and Welsh Government are putting 4.85 million towards a fully funded programme to look at rolling out that programme across the whole of Wales in conjunction with the WLGA. The core elements of that programme, as you will have seen from the video, which have changed very little since we developed the pilot back in 2015, are a school-based programme. It's a school-based programme delivered by school staff and partners. It's delivered over a minimum of 12 days over the summer holidays. It's a healthy breakfast and a healthy lunch, and they meet with the requirements for the term time school food. A minimum of 1 hour physical activity a day, and I'll show you in a minute that doesn't just mean playing football and rugby, it means all sorts of different things. It has an all-Wales food and fun nutrition education sessions, and those are delivered through the All Wales Nutrition Skills for Life programme, which is led by the dietitians in Wales, and they train up the coordinators within the schools. So not only do we get the benefit of that during the term time, during the holidays, but also during the term time as well. We also serve a family breakfast and lunch, and that's really about trying to pull together the children with the parents, and the parents with the parents, and the parents with the catering staff and the teachers. and enrichment sessions, which are delivered by a whole range of partners within the community during the programme. And again, I'm just going to show you some bits and pieces on that, and I apologise for the spelling mistake on here as well. So the main benefits of food and fun, and I really wanted to highlight that I know we're talking about dietary inequalities today, but actually inequalities of aspiration and educational inequalities are absolutely vital as well. And this is why this is not a holiday hunger programme. It is an inequalities programme in the broadest sense. So the schemes encourage children to be more active, to improve diets, to make sure kids are having fun with their friends, learning and engagement with the school, improving parents' health and well-being, parents learning new skills. So we do a lot of ESOL courses for parents while the kids are being occupied in the holiday scheme, for example. The scheme involves the whole family, so kids often take home recipe packs at the end of the day so that they can prepare meals with their family at home, something that was actually developed during the pandemic. It makes better uses of those school facilities, as you saw in the video, encourages community engagement, and it offers paid and voluntary support. So we're bringing more economic value into local communities as well through paying staff over the summer holidays. And again, signposting to other services. So a logic model was developed by Data Cymru with the WLGA, the Welsh Local Government Association, which came out with all of these different sort of benefits of food and fun. And I just wanted to show you some tweets. If anybody wants to see more, if you go onto the Food and Fun Wales Twitter account, it's just an absolute joy to look through all of the different experiences that the kids have over the holidays. So this shows some physical activity ones, everything from paddleboarding to circus skills, running around outside, doing golf. The Welsh Rugby Union is now involved with the programme as well. So all sorts of different types of physical activity. And again, with the educational, looking at educational attainment, the children have access to lots of different experiences. The police come and do talks, the ambulance staff come and do talks. We have Dogs Trust, as you can see from here. So there's a whole range of external agencies that come and always come and give their time for free over the holidays. And quite often these are agencies that might like to come and give some time during term time, but there isn't space in the school day. This shows some of the nutrition skills for life and the food and nutrition education sessions, and how much the children learn about cooking, but also about food and nutrition. And this again sort of shows that aspirational piece here. So we've got the police dogs and horses. I don't think I can see any horses there, but so they're having all sorts of different types of experiences, and you'll see there that Harlock Food Service, one of the organisations which provides the school meals, the food for the school meals. This is about mental health, and we've heard about this already today and how important that mental health aspect is. And kids, really hashtag making memories is one of the key hashtags that we have for food and fun. So it's really important that kids have something to talk about when they go back to school after the holidays, because otherwise they're going back to school and their friends are talking about the amazing holiday they've been on to Mallorca, and some kids just don't have anything to talk about. So we're making new memories. I've heard a little bit about this already, but I'm just going to very quickly mention, because I know that I'm out of time, but just talking about how important the evidence base is. And we have worked over the years with Northumbria, Cardiff University, Cardiff and Vale Health Board, and Data Cymru with the logic model, and how important it is to do engagement, raise the profile, lots of different bits and pieces. And then this is the final slide talking about the challenges moving forwards. And I do just want to highlight today that we are entering, as everybody knows, into really, really difficult times. And it's hugely concerning to think about how we're going to protect some of these services for our local authorities as we approach the autumn statement on Thursday. So I would just like to highlight that the situation is probably not going to get any easier for any of us, and we need to try and protect those things which are working well. Thank you.
Thanks so much for Katie for that inspiring example, and also for highlighting the importance of not being afraid of bold solutions and going up your comfort zone. And I loved what you said about making new memories, the idea that we can look at these programs in a very positive and aspirational way that that can really have many positive impacts into the future. We're going to go to Derbyshire now to hear from Andrew Forsey.
Thank you very much indeed, and good afternoon, everyone. It is an immense privilege to be with you for today's session, and it is particularly pleasing to be following Katie, who over a number of years now has demonstrated the art of the possible when it comes to the respective roles of voluntary, private and public sector bodies in bolstering household food security across Wales. And it's in that spirit of demonstrating the art of the possible that I'm going to be sharing some of the work being undertaken by Feeding Derbyshire, which is one of 60 regional and local partnerships that comprise the UK-wide Feeding Britain network. Now, by way of background, much of the past decade in community food provision has been characterised by an explosion in the numbers of food banks and other forms of crisis food provision being asked to dole out more and more emergency food parcels to people who are hungry, destitute and living with chronic food insecurity. The work of Feeding Derbyshire really speaks to our broader mission at Feeding Britain, which is to ensure that the next decade is characterised by two shifts. Firstly, the shift within community food provision away from relief and crisis and firefighting and towards prevention and resilience, thereby minimising the extent of chronic food insecurity and hunger in the first place, and also helping quickly out of chronic food insecurity once they have succumbed to one of life's inevitable crises. And the second shift is that through the provision of nutritious food in a way that makes it more affordable and more accessible for people, regardless of their background and regardless of their circumstances, we can unlock a whole range of wider positive outcomes when it comes to improved health and well-being, a greater sense of financial and food security within household, a stronger sense of belonging and connectedness within the community, and also a renewed sense of control over one's own life. And so there are 3 steps in that direction that Feeding Derbyshire has taken in recent months. Firstly is the development of 7 affordable food clubs which operate under the label of pantries across a number of rural and urban settings within the county, in Chesterfield, Matlock, Eckington, Amber Valley and Bolsover. And after upfront strategic and financial support from Derbyshire County Council and Feeding Britain, those pantries have gone on to build and retain a collective membership of 1,400 households. And the average household signing up for membership of the pantry tends to visit once every other week, spend between £4.50 and £6, and take home goods totalling around £25 in value. And that's a variety of fresh, chilled, frozen, long life and household goods. And so we've seen that by accessing the pantry once every other week, households really view this service as a bit of a safety valve in their budgets in the lead up to payday when things are looking tight and they might be struggling to access and afford the food they need to put a decent meal on the table. They know they can make the most of their membership, continue serving their family a decent meal and not have to worry about skipping meals or, heaven forbid, having to seek destitution level support from a food bank. And it's been interesting to observe from those 7 affordable food clubs the sense of dignity and self-worth that the households have reported from being able to choose for themselves from a wider range of goods the food that they and their families will eat that week in return for a manageable financial contribution. And it's on the back of that track record that an additional 4 pantries are about to be opened across the county. So there's a genuine affordable food network being developed there. And while that contributory principle has appealed in particular to pensioners and working households who either could not or would not ever seek help from a food bank. In Matlock, the local food bank has even reported a massive reduction in the numbers of people out of work having to seek emergency food parcels from them, as the pantry there is successfully safeguarding people's independence and freedom. And with an eye on encouraging healthier eating, the financial contributions tend to be weighted within each pantry to encourage higher levels of consumption of fruit and vegetables. And the provision of slow cookers and recipe cards is aiding that effort as well. Now, in succumbing to a bit of recency bias, I'm going to veer over the border from Derbyshire to Nottinghamshire just for one moment, because earlier today I was with another of our regional partnerships, the Bassett Law Food Insecurity Network, where Bassett Law Food Bank have, with support from Feeding Britain, developed a mobile greengrocer, the Bassett Law Community Shop, which in its first few weeks of operation has signed up 300 members. And the food bank settings in the villages being served by the new mobile greengrocer are, like what I mentioned in Matlock, reporting a massive reduction in the need for crisis level support, such as emergency food parcels. So we can begin to see that shift away from relief towards prevention. Secondly, within Feeding Derbyshire, we're acutely aware that the root cause of the chronic food insecurity we see tends to be a lack of money in people's pockets. And to that end, Feeding Derbyshire has successfully co-located a range of income maximisation services within both food banks and pantries to great effect. Under this programme, called Pathways from Poverty, 2,500 people on the brink of destitution have received specialist help with benefits, debt, utilities, housing and so on. And as a result, they have collectively reported an increase in annual household income of more than £500,000, and not surprisingly, that has brought with it a big reduction in the need for food banks as well as pantries. And it really feeds into that broader theme of trying to make nutritious food and wraparound services more accessible to people for when they really need them. And thirdly, from Feeding Derbyshire, they, like the rest of the Feeding Britain network, responded to that traditional hefty spike in the need for food banks that arose during the school holidays, particularly the longer summer holiday, by developing a Healthy Holidays programme consisting of nutritious meals and enriching activities like those Casey described in Wales. Even before the introduction of the Holiday Activities and Food programme across the whole of England, which resulted from Feeding Britain's parliamentary campaign 4 years ago to secure such a programme, Feeding Derbyshire was ensuring that 6,000 children received healthy breakfasts, batch-cooked lunches rich in protein and vitamins, as well as 2 pieces of fruit every time they attended the holiday club, and they were also able to take part in a range of physical and food-based activities. And as Casey touched upon, among the key outcomes of that programme has been a reduction in parental stress and anxiety. They no longer have to worry quite so much about how they're going to put food on the table and keep the kids occupied, and for working parents, how they might get the childcare they need to take on extra shifts and earn more money. So they're just 3 of the initiatives that Feeding Derbyshire, like the rest of the Feeding Britain network, through affordable food clubs, Pathways from Poverty and Healthy Holidays, are trying to embed with the communities we serve, to go with the grain of their needs and circumstances, to ensure that we can provide a year-round bulwark against chronic food insecurity and hunger, which bring the need for food banks into play. Thank you.
Thank you very much for Andrew for taking us through that impressive array of what is possible to address the issues we face. We're now going to go to Ruth Sirocco of Eat Club. Ruth.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to speak here. My name is Ruth, and I'm the founder and chief executive of Eat Club. I founded Eat Club in 2014 after I graduated from City University of London with a master's degree in food and nutritional policy, but I decided I wanted to use my skills on the ground to teach young people or improve young people's food outcomes rather than work in a policy capacity. We are a London-based charity. We engage with disadvantaged young people by cooking and eating together with them. We do not have our own kitchen, so all the work we do is done in partnership by working with our network of partners. They could be youth projects, community centres, homelessness charities, and sometimes schools. We try and look at the upper ages of young people rather than primary school kids, who I think are quite well looked after in terms of the food that they are taught and that they're fed. We've got a team of session leaders. They're experienced professional chefs. They all have youth work and facilitation experience with a unique passion for food. And this enables us to provide supportive, lively, and educational space for young people to express themselves through food. A typical course we deliver would be running for 6 weeks with about 15 young people joining once a week for 2 hours to cook and share the meal together. And at the moment, of course, and everything we heard here today with the cost of living crisis, that we feel our work is more needed than ever. Before we discuss a little more about the work we do, I just wanted to focus a little bit about Dylan. This is Dylan Stevens. He's 18 years old. He started cooking with Eat Club in Mary's Youth Club in Islington, which he has been attending for several years. He's a keen cook and joined with the Eat Club sessions. When the course finished, he returned to support our session leader and was an assistant for the course. He now attends catering college and wishes to become a chef. We recruited him to our program of young leaders, where he continues to contribute to Eat Club. And I interviewed him recently, and I asked him, when you started the sessions with Eat Club, did you already know you wanted to cook professionally? And he said, I also always had a passion for catering, and the fact that I could do some catering while the place I spent most time at outside of school and home added to my experience. Some of the kids at Mary's don't even know how to work the toasters, and parents, although it should be one of the things they teach children at a young age, parents don't actually teach their children how to cook that often, because nowadays it's more takeaways and fast foods, and when parents have time to cook, they just want to cook to get it over and done with. They don't have time to cook with their children. And please don't really try and look at the small numbers, but just an indication of the scope of our work at the moment, which is reported on our Salesforce system. You can see that in 2022, we have already, this is slightly out of date, but we've done about over 300 sessions across London with our partners. We have about 20 active partnerships with youth organizations across London. We cooked with 1,666 young people, not unique young people, and we have shared a meal with 3,500 odd young people who sat to eat at the end of the session. At the end of each course, which is normally about 6 weeks long, we give participants a survey to respond. It's slightly complicated, which is why we don't have that many results, coming in this year. However, you can see that on the top, and the left just shows you a little bit of the ethnic diversity of the young people that we work with. You can see that on the top right, that the vegetable consumption reported before and after the course, and then there's an increase in young people eating vegetables once or a few times a day after the course, and there is a decrease in those eating them never or less than once a week. And below, just a report of cooking confidence, and you can see that the sometimes group hasn't changed much, but the always group has doubled, the often group has nearly trebled, and the rarely has gone down from 19 to 4. And this is after a 6-week intervention. So what do we think are the barriers to healthy eating by young people? Some of them, of course, were mentioned here today. They grow up mainly eating chicken, rice, fries. They don't develop a taste for complex flavors. They eat spicy foods, but mostly rely on the comforting, salty, sweet, fatty foods. Food quite often isn't cooked and shared around a dining table in the homes for a variety of reasons, again, that were mentioned earlier. And there's also a stigma relating to healthy foods, which young people need to overcome when they wish to improve their diets. And of course, it's very hard to compete with an array of fast food outlets that are so prominent in low-income areas, especially in London. And a little more from our survey results. And again, please don't try to read the graphs up at the top, but you can. But if you were to look, you could see that the graph on the left indicates that cooking confidence has not increased only for 5% of respondents, and that means only 3 after the 60 people who reported there. And the graph on the right shows that the willingness to try new foods has increased, with 37 out of the 60 choosing the 8 to 10 more option. And below you can see some comments from the young people that we've worked with. A lot of them say they want to eat more meat. But apart from that, I think we tend to get pretty good feedback on our sessions. And this is my final slide, and this is about doing it the E-Club way. These are some things that we do in order to address these barriers that I've mentioned earlier and that were discussed before. We build young people's trust. We work with them for at least 6 weeks. I mean, we come to them, so obviously there are places that they're comfortable with, but they need to build the trust in us, which is why we don't deliver workshops. We come again and again, and the amount of time we spend with them quite often depends on the funding that we get, but 6 weeks is normally a minimum. We get them cooking. We use a variety of colorful vegetables. Most of our sessions are meat-free. We try and work with them to understand what kind of food they like to eat, and we try and cook those to make sure that they want to eat the food that we cook. And at the end, of course, eating around the table, I think, is a great opportunity to share experiences. It has positive impacts on well-being as well as health. And I just wanted to say thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Ruth, again for another inspiring story, and thank you for highlighting the importance of learning to love delicious food, which is also healthy, and there's a biology to that you have to be exposed to complex flavors in order to learn to really enjoy them, as well as the important social aspects of food. So thanks very much for that, Ruth. We're now going to end with Fran and Sue. We've heard from different places across the country. We're now going to hear about an effort of how to target these efforts to address dietary inequalities.
Thank you very much for that introduction. So I'm Dr. Fran Pontin from the Consumer Data Research Centre at the University of Leeds. So what we do as an organisation is try and bridge that gap between academics and industry and sort of provide a safe and secure way for researchers to use consumer data for public good. And I'll be doing a double act today with my colleague Sue from Which, and she's head of consumer rights there. And a big thanks also to Judith Batchelor, who's in the room, who brought these two organisations together to make this happen, to harness big data to tackle the inequalities and reduce disparities in food inequality. So I'm going to talk to you today about our recently launched Priority Places tool. So this launched last week, and the aim of the tool is to bring together 7 domains of food insecurity to highlight the places most in need of support this winter. So I'm going to do the kind of technical spiel, and I'll hand over to Sue to talk about Which's campaign and call for action. So the index is comprised of 7 domains across food insecurity, and I'll kind of go into a bit about the detail of each. One important thing to note is this all uses open data, so it's reproducible and updatable as these data sources are made available. So, for example, currently we're using some of the 2011 census data, unfortunately, but we're looking to update that as it comes out in the coming weeks. So the first domain is proximity to food facilities. So this incorporates the average distance to the nearest largest supermarket, as well as the number of stores within 1 kilometre. So kind of representing that access to cheap food. We also have accessibility of these supermarket facilities. So the average distance someone has to travel to get to the supermarket, and also the distance they need to travel by public transport. So to calculate all these access metrics I'm going to talk about, we took every postcode in the UK and calculated every single distance supermarket and then averaged it up to local super output areas. So these are small neighbourhoods, which you'll see on the next slide, and they represent around 650 households. We also looked at access to online deliveries, so it's particularly given the pandemic and the increased prevalence of people ordering their food online, and often people can't necessarily get out to the supermarket, so that other form of food access. We looked at the availability of online groceries, so this is a particular issue in rural areas. And we also looked at the propensity to shop online, so using the internet users classification based on British population survey, we looked at how likely people were to use online shopping to start with. We then have access to non-supermarket food provision. So as we've heard in some of the previous talks, a lot of people that actually don't have access to a supermarket, or that's not where they shop, or that's not necessarily where their cheapest food is. So we looked at distance to non-supermarket food provision, and this was using FSA data. So anywhere that has a food hygiene rating, we looked at the distance to that outlet. If it was somewhere that provided cheaper food, so we're not including kind of expensive cafes here. And also the number of those outlets within 1 kilometre of the home. We then also looked at the average distance to the nearest market as well, so providing lots of different metrics to look at food access. On the flip side, we're also looking at the different socioeconomic barriers. So obviously, income deprivation is a major barrier and driver of food insecurity. So we looked at the proportion of the population in each of those small local areas or neighbourhoods that are experiencing income deprivation, and also their access to cars. So how are they able to travel to the supermarket by car, or are they relying on that previously mentioned public transport element? One of the major ones I want to highlight is the food support for families. So this is where we're looking at where there's almost already that demand, or kind of food insecurity demand. And this is highlighted by looking at those eligible for free school meals, given the caveats we've heard earlier that not actually every area people aren't actually eligible when they should be. Again, looking at Healthy Start voucher usage, so looking at uptake when we can by each local area, and also distance to the nearest food bank, so how far does someone have to travel and how many food banks are in their local area. Finally, the final aspect we included is fuel poverty. Given the rising cost of fuel, we looked at the proportion of houses in fuel poverty, and also the numbers using prepayment meters, which represents a more expensive way to purchase or to pay for energy. I won't go into too much detail about how we calculated the index, but the index was calculated individually for England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. Some of the metrics weren't available in all areas, and some were estimated differently for different devolved nations. So, for example, fuel poverty is estimated slightly differently across the devolved nations. We then weighted them in our index, so access representing 50% and made up of the first 4 domains, and then sort of barriers and socio-demographic barriers in the final 50% of those 3 remaining domains. And I'll hand on to Sue to talk about the domain.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. So here...
Jumped off too soon. So can we play the video, please? So I'm going to play this video in the background, and hopefully it will play while I speak. So this is just a quick demo of the tool. So as you can see, we have it's not playing, so I'll just speak over what you should be seeing. Now we go. Here we go. So we have our deciles of highest priority areas. So as you first see this tool, it only has the highest priority areas highlighted. You can zoom in, select all deciles. You can then hover over the area and see what actually is driving food insecurity within that area. So which of the domains is the one that's driving the food insecurity. We also have the supermarket locations superimposed as well. So you can zoom in on the area. Here we're looking at highest priority, and we can actually see where those nearest supermarkets are and what they are. It's also then possible to go and select each of the domains, so just to map those to kind of get a more insight into what's driving those food insecurity within that area, or what might be of a particular interest for a certain intervention if you're a retailer or a government policy maker. So now I'll hand over to Sue.
Thanks, Fran. Well, I hope you can see from the tool, as Fran's demonstrated, that there's huge potential to use this to really help identify where people are who are most in need and what the reasons are for why they're in need, whether that's mainly access issues or whether that is about income levels or whether it's a combination of each. As which, we want to make sure that people get as much support as they can. We know there's obviously a crucial role for government, but our Affordable Food for All campaign focuses on what supermarkets can do to support consumers. And using the tool, as you saw, we're able to identify where supermarkets are located closest to those places where people are most in need. Lots of people have obviously been talking about the scale of the problem this morning, but the consumer research that we've been doing over the last few months has just shown an incredibly depressing picture of people really struggling, many people starting to trade down, an increasing number of people being really poorly affected. So the last survey that we did, 16% of people were saying that they were having to skip meals, for example, and we're seeing an increasing number of people having to rely on food banks for the first time. Obviously, the reasons behind this are really complex. We've asked people about what sorts of things would help them and the support that they need. And we know that people think supermarkets can help them. And we've used some of the things that people told us through our consumer research to help inform a 10-point action plan that we published last week along with the index, which we're hoping supermarkets will sign up to, and really use this priority places index to be innovative in the sorts of actions that they're taking to really support people and hopefully help them get through this crisis as best they can. Since I put this on Friday when I had to submit the slides, and I've just checked, and it's now, I think, 44,700. So we've got this petition obviously helping to put pressure on the supermarkets and show the level of support behind this. Just to give a very quick run through of the action plan, it broadly falls into three main areas where we feel that there's scope for supermarkets to do more. So around clear and transparent pricing, around availability of affordable options, and around targeted promotions. And the Priority Places for Food tool is obviously central to this in order to enable supermarkets to be able to shift their spend to target people who are most in need. The first area, I think, is something that affects everybody, and is something we did a report in September, Which magazine, and found that there are still lots of issues with transparency of pricing. We had a big campaign a few years ago around unit pricing, but it's clear that it's often missing, it's not on promotional offers, so it's very difficult just on a very basic level to compare which is the best deal when you're looking in the supermarket. And we know people are sceptical about special offers. The second area is about availability of affordable ranges. Jack Monroe has obviously put a lot of pressure on supermarkets around this, but doing more to provide a range of essential items that enable people to make healthy choices, and particularly making sure that they're available in the priority places where people are most in need. And then one of the issues, as Fran highlighted, that emerged from the index is that some people are in places where they just feel that they don't really have access to online deliveries. So looking at ways that that can be made more efficient to help support people where they don't have access. Not that supermarkets are the only solution to this, but we know that for some people, they would like to have access to a wider choice of foods at cheaper prices than they can get from some of the outlets that are available to them at the moment. And then the third area with several action points is around marketing budgets and promotions tailored to support those most in need. And this is obviously the whole action plan recognises that different supermarkets will have different capabilities. So for some, they'll be able to do more through loyalty cards, through others it will be vouchers, but being creative in terms of the sorts of promotions that they can be offering to support people, and obviously making sure that they're genuine promotions, but also doing things which some supermarkets have already started to do, so providing additional top-ups for Healthy Start or Best Start food schemes, or doing more to actually promote those schemes, because we know when we've looked at the data, there's very low take-up when people are actually entitled to have these vouchers in some parts of the country. And then offering straightforward discounts rather than relying on multi-buys. Again, something some supermarkets are already doing, so you haven't got to make a big outlay to start with. You haven't then got the issues of food waste or eating more than you might want to. And then building on the evidence of what works to put more promotions on healthier foods. And that's one of the top things that came out in our survey in terms of where people think supermarkets can do more to help them. And then underpinned by inspiration, so making it more appealing and easier for people to prepare tasty food on a budget. And that's something that we've seen some of the supermarkets already doing with link-ups with celebrity chefs, for example, Feed Your Family for a £5, that kind of thing. So just to finish my last slide, what we've done with the index, there's obviously lots of things that you can get from the index. We have focused very much on supermarkets at this point, but we're really keen to explore how it can be used more widely by other stakeholders, and potentially whether there's other data that can be fed into this as well to help inform the types of interventions that can be made. But we've taken the 20% of places, the lowest 20% of places in the index, and defined those as the priority places where most attention is needed. And as you can see here, you can see the split within the different countries and how that breaks down for rural and urban. So as I said, we're keen to explore this more with you, and we'll be focusing in particular on supermarkets over the coming months and trying to push them through our various campaigning approaches to do more and to support people who really need that help.
Thanks so much. What an amazing tool, and also that 10-point plan really does resonate with what we know with the challenges and issues that families really face on the ground. So congratulations for that brilliant piece of work. Okay, so get your questions ready. We're now going to have a panel. Could I ask all the speakers from this morning to come and sit here so we can have a quick round of questions. So we've got some questions online, I think, and maybe some questions in the room as well. If I could sit here, if there's space to sit, I think there should be space. Or okay, we don't seem to have got space for our double act here. Sorry, but anybody else? Okay. Okay, sit here. Sorry. So, in fact, why don't you sit here and I will stand up. Come on. So, okay, do we have some questions? If there are questions, if I could ask you just to ask a question, and so we can keep it simple. Alison. And if you could just say your name before your question.
So I'm Alison Tedstone. I've got a question for Andrew.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about the sustainability of what you're doing for Derbyshire. Obviously, really great work going on, but how do you feel about the sustainability of it and the cost of it?
So before you answer that, Andrew, so I'm just going to ask for some more questions. Do we have some questions from online?
Hi everyone, we have a question from Amy Dale from NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde. And this is a question for Katie Palmer. She asks, is the Food and Fun programme open to all primary children, or is there an inclusion criteria?
Okay. Great. So we're just going to go straight and answer those questions to those who were directed, starting with Andrew.
Great. I have mixed feelings over the sustainability of those affordable food clubs in particular, because my naive assumption 4 years ago when we began developing this programme of work was that we could access these oceans of good quality, edible surplus or abundance, however one phrases it, in the supply chain. And we could get all of those fresh, chilled, frozen, ambient goods we would need at a low enough cost to then make them available at an affordable enough rate for people who really needed that help, and we could wash our faces clean, so to speak, on the financial front. Since then, as a citizen and a consumer, I've been pleased to see actually a reduction in the amount of surplus coming from those supply chains. That can only be a good thing if there's less waste sloshing around. But it has forced us to rethink our own supply chains for those affordable food clubs. So of course that's not without its challenges and difficulties. I'd be foolish to pretend otherwise. But returning to that theme of the art of the possible, in having that rethink around where our food comes from, we're having to get a bit funky and creative. So we're looking at the wholesale options, the retail options, teaming up with local allotment holders, farmers, manufacturers and so on. So we can continue getting that range and quality and quantity of food that households rightly expect to receive when they're making a financial contribution for those goods, but still enables us to wash our faces clean on the financial front. And one lesson I've drawn, which kind of echoes in my mind the early roots of the cooperative movement here in the 1850s, is in one of the very poorest parts of Glasgow, where we've opened recently an affordable food club. And much of the stock there, around half of it, is actually coming from purchases that we make through wholesalers and retailers, partly because we want to ensure it's a culturally appropriate offer in this very diverse estate. But where we've moved away from that lower fixed financial contribution of £2.50, £3.50, £4.50, whatever, residents on that estate actually are paying nearer to £9 on average per visit. They're still taking home more than £20 worth of food, but it's manageable for them. It's generating enough income for us to cover those food costs and have a paid member of staff. And it's actually beginning to show what could be possible with less surplus food coming our way, but with a flexible membership and pricing model, buying in the food we need to meet those local needs. It can be done, but not without difficulty.
Thanks, Andrew. Katie?
Yes, so in terms of eligibility, it's not done on the basis of individuals. Originally, when the programme was set up, it was looking at schools which had around 16% or above free school meal eligibility, so it was done on a kind of a schools basis. But actually, as we all know, what's happened with eligibility for free school meals with that 7,500, actually now it's done on a case-by-case basis, so schools make the case for wanting to run the programme, and that case is made to the Welsh Local Government Association, and then they through an application process. So it's done on a schools basis.
Great, thank you. Any more questions? Yes.
John Mathers, question for Sue. You put out these challenges to the supermarkets. What kind of response have you had from them?
Thanks very much. Well, we published the index and the report and action plan last Tuesday, and we've written to the CEOs of all the major supermarkets asking them to commit. And as I mentioned, we recognise that not all of the actions are going to be appropriate to all of the supermarkets, but we expect an ambitious approach, and we expect them to be embracing the priority places for food index in order to target the support that they that's available. And we're still getting the responses, to be honest. We've had positive responses from a couple of the CEOs. We are following up with meetings with various teams within the supermarket. And we're also putting in place our own plans for how we'll monitor progress against the different actions within the plan. And one of the things that we were really hoping we might be able to overlay within the index was the availability of budget ranges, for example. And that's something that we still hope that we'll be able to get a picture of and make sure that, you know, that when budget ranges are offered, that they're all supporting people in making healthier choices, not just encouraging cheaper choices.
And another question online, please.
Again, it's a question for Fran and Sue. Is the tool available for everyone to use?
Yes, it is. So we can send around the link for everybody if that's helpful afterwards. So yes, and really appreciate any feedback and thoughts about how it can support interventions at, you know, whether that is local government, replicating really positive initiatives that are happening in similar places around the country that could be used within the priority places that are identified. And as I said, if people think there are other data sets that would help, then, you know, really keen to have those discussions as well. But it's freely available for everybody to use however they want.
Okay, can I, yeah, please.
Hi, it's Alison Greenhouse Hall. A question for you, Rebecca. Is there any lessons we can learn from our international kind of colleagues? I was particularly shocked to hear about the school meals, and those who were eligible for school meals were getting the smaller portions. So who's doing it well, and what does that look like?
Yeah, thank you. Julia can come in here as well if you want to. So one of the, I think, striking things that we found when we compared across the UK, Portugal and Norway was the difference that school meals in Portugal seem to make to children's diets and lives. Very few of our sample in Portugal weren't in receipt of a school meal, and they have a standardised meal that's served across all schools, so it's kind of really strong legislation around school feeding, and it consisted of a brown bread roll, a meal with meat or fish or a vegetarian equivalent, vegetables, some fruit and water. I think occasionally jelly was allowed. And that was the same meal that children were given, and there was a three-tier kind of pricing system, so money wasn't exchanged up front. So it was much healthier, and it was much more inclusive. And I think one of the things that we've argued in the book, you know, Portugal is a much poorer country, but they've prioritised investing in school meals because they know about the importance of it. So as you were saying, you know, with the Feed the Future campaign, I think that's one of the things that we need to really sort of think about school meals, not as a cost to taxpayers, but as an investment in our children's health and our future.
Okay, thank you. And at the back.
Question for Ruth Bell. Does the school food review include a review of specific food standards?
Could you just repeat that question, please? The thermometer review, did you mention?
Yes, so one of the online listeners asked, does the school food review include a review of specific food standards?
I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer that question. The Marmot review wasn't a school food review. It was a review of the social determinants of health and health inequalities in England. So it covered all the social determinants. It wasn't a specific food health review. I think a specific food health review from the perspective of inequalities would be an extremely valuable thing to do, as a matter of fact.
Thank you. So there is just one more from online, yeah?
Again, it's a question for Katie. Are there any plans in Wales to extend the free school provision to secondary schools?
It's already happening, actually. The universal free school meals, was that?
Yes.
Yes. Not at the moment. There is a commitment to roll out universal free school meals by the end of 2024 as it stands, and to look at increasing eligibility beyond that. I think any governments making commitments at the moment are going to really struggle with where we're at in the big wide world at the moment.
Okay, thanks for the questions. If I could come in and ask a question. It's a question that is really annoying because we know we need to do lots and lots of different things to address these concerns, and in fact I made that point in my remarks as well. But given the scope of political and economic opportunity at the moment to really try and push things forward, I'd love to hear from each of you as a closing round of what is the one thing that you think needs to be put at the top in terms of the priority actions, and who do you want to take it? So if I could throw that challenge out to answer very, very briefly for each of you. Can I start with you, Katie? And you can say, fund my project, by the way, if that's what you think needs to happen.
I think I'd have to say to make sure that every child was receiving at least one high-quality free school meal every day. But importantly, that's fundamentally linked to developing local supply chains, as well as looking at the free school meal in itself, and to look at the benefits that the wider economy can give if you're linking free school meals to supply chains and business as well.
Thank you. Ruth?
Well, coming from the UCL Institute of Health Equity, I totally agree with Katie, but from our perspective, I think putting health equity at the heart of all decision making at government level would be a real game changer. And it's something we haven't seen. We've seen local authorities do that, and we've seen what can happen in places where they take health inequality as something that should be a focus of all the policies across the sector. And I would like to see that taken by the government too, to put health equity in all policies to improve health and to reduce health inequalities across the population.
So fundamentally altering the nature of decision making then. But yeah, very good point, thank you. And Nikita.
So I think the question is really asking us to focus on what's going to have impacts, but also what's politically possible and important now, given the situation that we find ourselves in. So I would again say that the thing that we're most focused on is calling on the national government to extend the eligibility criteria for free school meals to all children in receipt of universal credit as a really important first step, recognising that for every £1 that's invested in free school meals, £1.38 is reinvested back in society. And you know, if we're thinking about growth and economic improvement, then that's a real investment for both our children and society, whilst also recognising a long-term ambition for universal free school meals for children in England. That's what we'd be focusing on.
That message is coming out loud and clear, so thank you, Rebecca.
I say ditto, because I was going to say the same thing, and agree. The immediate first step has to be, you know, widening eligibility to families on universal credit, but that as in the longer term, we have to sort of see. Margaret Macmillan argued 100 years ago that if the state insists on compulsory education, it also has the right and a duty to provide children with proper nourishment. So we think, you know, based on the research that we've done, we should be extending eligibility not only to children in primary schools, but also to children in secondary schools as well.
Thank you. Andrew.
Well, in addition to funding our project, I would urge the Prime Minister and the Chancellor to look across the Atlantic Ocean to the Biden-Harris administration, who a couple of weeks ago published, yes, an ambitious but ultimately workable strategy for eliminating hunger and chronic food insecurity from America in this decade. The strategy, all right, there was some gobbledygook in there, but I was able to detect 3 themes. Firstly, to establish an adequate national minimum income through the labour market and the social security system. Secondly, to improve both the coverage and the take-up of statutory support schemes. In this country, of course, that'll mean free school meals and Healthy Start, and we would propose shifting the basis of registering for those schemes away from opt-in towards opt-out through automatic registration. And then thirdly, not forgetting the role of corporate, philanthropic and local government support for really getting behind these innovative models of community food provision, particularly mobile models of community food provision that can fill the gaps that exist within the major retailers, as we've been hearing about, and safeguarding everyone's access to affordable, nutritious food. So look at what Biden and Harris have done would be my advice to the Prime Minister.
Great, thank you. Great point, Andrew. Thank you, Ruth.
Well, I think, like Andrew, invest in my project, but really I think we need to invest in young people because they're the next generation, and I think they're slightly overlooked. As a small charity, we rely on constant funding, and because we do things with food, we can fit under a variety of umbrellas. Boris Johnson had COVID because he was obese, so obesity suddenly was in the limelight, but then it's employment, and then it's other means of deprivation. But I think there just has to be this idea that there should be money put forward to support projects that make lives of young people better in this country.
Thank you. Fran.
Yeah, to reflect that and sort of all the projects that have been spoken about to date, I think emphasising a place-based approach. So we've heard from lots of projects across lots of different places and seeing what actually is a priority there and speak to the local people and look at the local places to make those impactful changes.
I mean, I think given the scale of the crisis, there's obviously a lot of things that need to be done that are outside of food policy. And so the Chancellor's announcement is going to be quite key in terms of what happens on things like energy support and how that impacts on people's situations and whether more people are going to be struggling over the next few months or not. Sorry, this isn't one. Sorry, Corinne, I can't do one. But I think then there's the really important role that government has in terms of that nutritional safety net that people have talked about in terms of expanding eligibility for free school meals, Healthy Start, Best Start foods. So that's important. But then, as Fran has said, we think there is a real opportunity to really try and use data to understand where people are most likely to be facing most difficulty and why, and then really target interventions. And as we've highlighted, we think the supermarkets can step up and do a lot more in that area, but hopefully we can use this also to look at other interventions and really positive initiatives, as you said, that can be replicated around the country, trying to, you know, cushion the blow, I suppose, not solve the problem.
I would echo what has been said already on the panel on young people and free school meals. But I think the point for me is that areas of deprivation need to be resources are limited, but they should be targeted, and they should be premium target for those areas, if you see what I mean. The resources should go there first and foremost, because they haven't been going there despite all the rhetoric of levelling up.
Thank you so much. I mean, I think the really fantastic suggestions that we've just heard are illustrative of the real exceptional nature of our speakers this morning. So I'd like to give them all a big round of applause, please. Thank you very much indeed. And if you could just if you could stay seated just as I bring this morning to a close. Again, thank you to the speakers for highlighting what you've highlighted, both about the problems and the solutions. And there's a few things that have really come out strongly, I think. The first is I have to say, I feel a sense of shame of the reality that we've heard of what's happening in a rich country. And at the same time, I've felt this incredible space opening of opportunity, that the problems have gotten worse, but that means there's an opportunity for the diverse set of constituents who really want to do something about this problem to get together and take the opportunity for change. And second, that in doing that, we have to listen to the voices of the unheard. We've heard particularly about young people and the power of young people's voices, and that's clearly going to be essential alongside other voices as well. The third thing that I heard is, despite food being a problem, it's also a solution, and there are many different types of solutions, and we've just been hearing about them now as well as earlier. Food, if we frame it as a solution, we can get there and we can move positive change forward. And finally, that tackling dietary inequalities in particular and focusing on inequalities and focusing on diet is actually an entry point for having multiple benefits across society. It doesn't just benefit nutrition, but it also brings economic benefits, it brings social benefits, it brings mental health benefits. And these are many of the most profound problems in our society at the moment. So focusing on dietary inequalities really does seem to have multiple benefits to address all of these kinds of problems. So I'd like to thank again the speakers and for the questions as well for highlighting these important issues.